Under a somber, heavy sky, a forgotten, dilapidated neighborhood set the stage for our story. Here, a sharp 17-year-old black girl, grappling with the impossible cost of college, crosses paths with a heavily tattooed biker in a bakery thick with unspoken judgment. When he inadvertently loses his wallet, moments after a heroic rescue, she steps up. Witnessing his selflessness, she pays for his meal, sacrificing her own shot at a scholarship. Little does she know this single act of bravery is about to reshape her entire future. But before we plunge into this tale, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We genuinely value your insights. The sky, a leaden blanket, pressed down on the run-down streets, promising rain that never quite arrived. Maya Thompson, 17 and slender from too many missed meals, strode purposefully down the cracked pavement at 7:30 a.m. Her clothes, though worn, were impeccably clean, ironed with a pride that defied her circumstances. Boarded-up storefronts and for-rent signs narrated the plight of a neglected community, though vibrant murals valiantly defied the decay. At the rusted mailbox outside her grandmother's modest house, Maya's heart pounded as she retrieved an envelope emblazoned with a university seal. Trembling fingers tore it open, her gaze devouring the words that held her future. A scholarship offer, but tragically only partial. The fleeting joy on her face dissolved as the stark reality hit. She still needed $8,000, a sum completely out of reach. The screen door groaned as she approached the front porch, where Grandma Rose sat in her familiar chair, the gentle hum of her oxygen tank a constant companion. At 72, Rose carried herself with a quiet dignity, a testament to a lifetime of weathered storms, though recent coughing spells and dark circles under her eyes hinted at silent battles. "What's that letter, baby?" Rose asked, a knowing smile playing on her lips as if she already knew the answer. Maya sank onto the porch steps, the acceptance letter feeling impossibly heavy. "I got in, Grandma. Full scholarship for pre-law." She swallowed hard. "But I still need $8,000 for room and board." Rose's face glowed with fierce pride, though a flicker of worry crossed her eyes. She had been concealing the true extent of her illness, desperate to spare Maya the sacrifice of college for caretaking. "We'll find a way, child. The Lord provides." The mornings stretched between them, heavy with unspoken anxieties. Finally, Rose reached into her worn purse, meticulously counting out exact change, bills and coins representing weeks of careful saving. "I've been craving those lemon pastries from Murphy's downtown," Rose said, pressing the money into Maya's palm. "Would you fetch them for me? They're my favorite." Maya hesitated, acutely aware of how every dollar counted. But seeing the profound joy this small luxury brought her grandmother, she nodded. "Of course, Grandma." The walk downtown was a journey of stark contrast. Her neighborhood of auto shops and vacant lots slowly gave way to cleaner streets as she neared the railroad tracks, a literal divide in their town. On the other side lay the affluent downtown district, with its pristine storefronts and blooming flower boxes. Maya glanced at her old watch, 8:45 a.m. She needed to reach the library by noon to research additional scholarships before its 2 p.m. closing. The ticking clock spurred her on, her worn shoes slapping against the pavement. Crossing into downtown, the shift was unmistakable. Here, white faces predominated, and those who noticed her regarded her with suspicion or cool indifference. Some even veered across the street to avoid sharing the sidewalk. Maya had grown accustomed to such reactions, yet the sting never quite faded. Murphy's Bakery and Cafe, a warm beacon on Main Street, beckoned with windows aglow, showcasing an array of fresh pastries that made Maya's empty stomach ache with hunger. She pushed open the door, instantly conscious of how she stood out amidst the well-dressed patrons enjoying their leisurely morning coffee. Conversations didn't stop, but they muted, voices dropping to whispers, eyes flicking towards her before quickly darting away. Maya approached the counter, where a middle-aged woman with meticulously styled hair offered a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'd like a dozen lemon pastries, please," Maya requested politely. "That'll be 10 minutes while we prepare a fresh batch," the woman replied, gesturing to a small corner table. "You can wait over there." Maya settled into the chair, keenly aware of the sidelong glances. She pulled out her notebook, attempting to focus on scholarship research, but the palpable judgment in the air made it impossible to concentrate. Outside the window, Main Street buzzed with morning activity, Parents dropping off children, business owners unlocking their shops. The ordinary rhythm of a community she observed from its periphery, a place where she had never truly belonged. Maya walked briskly toward Murphy's, her grandmother's precious pastry money clutched securely in her pocket. The morning bustle surrounded her. Parents dropping children at school, shopkeepers opening their doors, the comfortable pulse of a community in its daily routine. She moved with purpose but caution, ever mindful of how she was perceived in this part of town. At 9:15 a.m., the sudden roar of a motorcycle ripped through the morning air like thunder, drawing every eye on the street. Maya paused, watching a massive Harley-Davidson rumble down Main Street, its chrome gleaming under a sun that had finally broken through the overcast sky. The rider, a man in his mid-30s, wore a black leather vest over a faded t-shirt, his arms a canvas of intricate tattoos. His weathered face hinted at countless roads traveled and experiences etched into every line around his eyes. As he killed the engine and the bike idled outside Murphy's bakery, Maya noticed him sit for a moment, running a hand through his dark hair, the gesture heavy with exhaustion. The sidewalk's reaction was immediate and telling. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer. Conversations died mid-sentence, replaced by a ripple of whispers through the gathering crowd. Maya watched faces transform from curiosity to suspicion, then to outright hostility, all directed at a man who had simply arrived. The biker, Jake, though Maya didn't know his name yet, slowly removed his helmet, seemingly oblivious to the stares. Or perhaps Maya thought he was simply accustomed to them. There was a quiet resignation in his movements, speaking of someone who had learned to expect the worst from first impressions. "Mama, why is everyone staring at that man?" a little girl asked her mother, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Shoo, Emily, don't look. People like that are dangerous," the mother whispered, pulling her daughter away. A familiar pang echoed in Maya's chest, the same feeling she got when people crossed the street to avoid her, or watched her with suspicion in stores. She recognized the profound injustice of being judged before being known, condemned before being heard. Just then, a bright red ball bounced energetically into the street, followed instantly by Tommy, an 8-year-old boy with cafe-au-lait skin and eyes alight with the singular focus only children possess when chasing a beloved toy. He darted between parked cars, utterly absorbed in retrieving his ball, completely oblivious to the approaching danger. Maya's blood turned to ice as she spotted the delivery truck barreling down Main Street. The driver, a man in his 20s, was engrossed in his phone, texting while driving, utterly unaware of the small figure who had just stepped directly into his path. "No." Maya started to call out, but she was too far away, her voice swallowed by the truck's rumbling engine. Time seemed to stretch, agonizingly slow. The truck thundered closer while Tommy bent to retrieve his ball, still unaware. Maya began to run towards the street, but a sickening certainty told her she would never reach him in time. Then Jake moved. Maya watched in astonishment as the biker, who had been adjusting his gloves beside his motorcycle, suddenly exploded into action. He must have seen the danger at the exact moment Maya did, but unlike her, he was close enough to act. Without a flicker of hesitation, without any thought for his own safety, Jake launched himself forward. His long legs covered the distance to Tommy in powerful strides, his boots thudding against the asphalt. At the last possible second, just as the truck bore down on them, Jake dove, scooping the startled boy into his arms and rolling them both towards the sidewalk. The truck roared past, its oblivious driver missing them by mere inches. Jake's leather jacket scraped against the rough asphalt, tearing and leaving his elbow bloody. His knee took a hard impact, causing him to limp. But Tommy was completely unharmed, protected by Jake's body throughout the rolling fall. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding with the adrenaline of witnessing a near tragedy transmute into heroism. Around her, the crowd that had been whispering suspiciously about Jake moments before now surged forward, their reactions a complicated mix. Tommy, more shocked than hurt, began to cry, the delayed reaction children have when danger suddenly registers. Jake, ignoring his own injuries, immediately focused on comforting the frightened boy. "Hey there, buddy. You're okay," Jake said, his voice surprisingly gentle and warm, devoid of the roughness his appearance might have suggested. He knelt to Tommy's eye level, his large tattooed hands surprisingly tender as he checked the boy for injuries. "That was scary, wasn't it? But you're safe now. What's your name, Tommy? The boy sniffled, his tears already slowing under Jake's calm reassurance. Well, Tommy, you've got to be really careful around streets, okay? Cars can't always see you and they can't stop as fast as you can run. Your ball isn't worth getting hurt over, right? Maya watched this interaction with growing amazement. She saw the genuine concern in Jake's eyes, the respectful way he spoke to Tommy, the careful examination of the boy's limbs to ensure nothing was broken. This was not the behavior of a dangerous man. This was someone with deep reserves of kindness and protective instinct. But the crowd's reaction remained troubling. While some murmured approval and gratitude, others clung to suspicion, their prejudices too deeply ingrained to be swayed by evidence. Probably staged, Maya heard one man mutter to his wife. Bikers are always looking for ways to make themselves look good. Probably had that kid ready to run into traffic. I don't trust it. Agreed, another voice chimed in. People like that, they're always working some angle. Anger simmered in Maya's chest at the sheer injustice. Here was a man who had literally risked his life to save a child, and people were still finding ways to cast him as the villain. She longed to speak up to tell these people what she had witnessed, but she knew her voice carried little weight in this crowd. Tommy's mother, Carol, came rushing from a nearby playground, where she'd been chatting with other parents. Seeing her son in the arms of a leather-clad stranger, her first instinct was protective fear. Tommy, what happened? Are you okay? She rushed forward, somewhat roughly pulling her son away from Jake, holding him close while her eyes darted suspiciously between Jake and the crowd. Mama, the motorcycle man saved me. Tommy exclaimed excitedly, his fear already forgotten in the way children bounce back from trauma. A big truck was coming and he caught me like Superman. Several people in the crowd began explaining what had happened, their accounts wildly skewed by their own biases. Some praised Jake's heroism, while others found ways to diminish or question his motives. Carol's expression softened slightly as she slowly grasped the truth. Thank you, she said to Jake, though her voice remained cautious and formal. Thank you for helping him. Jake slowly stood, favoring his injured leg and brushed dirt and gravel from his torn jacket. Just glad he's okay, he said simply. Kids that age, they don't always see the dangers around them. Good thing someone was watching out for him. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya noticed how quickly people's attention shifted away from Jake's heroic act. The suspicious whispers resumed, the sideways glances continued, and within minutes, it was as if the rescue had never happened. Jake was once again just a dangerous-looking biker who didn't belong in their nice neighborhood. Across the street, Maya and Jake's eyes met for a brief moment. She saw something in his gaze, a mixture of sadness and resignation that spoke of a lifetime of being misunderstood and misjudged. Without thinking, Maya gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, a silent message. I saw what really happened. I know who you really are. Jake looked surprised by her recognition, unaccustomed to finding allies in unexpected places. He nodded back slightly, a ghost of a smile touching his weathered features, before both continued on their separate paths. Maya watched as Jake limped towards the bakery, his torn jacket and bloody elbow silent testaments to his selfless act. A deep sense of injustice churned within her at his treatment, alongside a growing curiosity about the man behind the intimidating exterior. Following him into Murphy's, Maya immediately felt the shift in atmosphere. The warm buzz of conversation abruptly died, replaced by an uncomfortable silence and furtive glances. Parents instinctively steered their children to tables farther away, and an elderly couple near the door actually gathered their things and left, abandoning their half-finished breakfast. The waitress, a nervous woman in her 40s with carefully styled hair, approached Jake's table with palpable reluctance. She held her order pad like a shield, taking his order, coffee and a burger, with minimal eye contact, her discomfort radiating through the room. Maya settled back at her corner table to await her pastries, observing this painful display of prejudice with growing indignation. She watched Jake handle the hostile atmosphere with quiet dignity, saying please and thank you, eating carefully despite his obvious hunger, making no attempt to defend himself against the unspoken accusations hanging in the air like smoke. The contrast was heartbreaking. This was the same man who had just risked everything to save a child, now treated like a criminal simply for existing in this space. Maya felt ashamed of her community and proud of the stranger who bore their prejudice with such grace. "Order up," came the call from behind the counter. Her grandmother's lemon pastries were ready. As Maya prepared to leave, she glanced at her watch. 9:45 a.m. She still had time to make it to the library for her crucial scholarship research. But something in Jake's sudden change of expression caught her attention. He was frantically patting his pockets, his face paling with what looked like panic. Maya hesitated at the door, sensing that something significant was about to unfold, something that would test not just Jake's character but her own as well. Jake's face went pale as he frantically searched his pockets, checking and rechecking places his wallet should have been. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. It was gone, likely lost during his heroic dive to save Tommy, when he rolled across the asphalt. "Excuse me," Jake said to the waitress, his voice steady despite his obvious distress. "I seem to have lost my wallet during that accident outside. If I could just call someone to verify what happened or maybe come back later with—" "I've heard every sob story in the book, pal," interrupted Murphy himself, emerging from the kitchen, flour-dusted hands on his hips and a scowl on his face. "You ordered the food, you pay for it. Simple as that." The tension in the room thickened like smoke. Other customers began chiming in with their own commentary. "Figures," muttered a man in a business suit. "Should have known better than to let him in here," added a woman with perfectly styled hair. "Call the cops," suggested another voice from the back. Jake maintained his dignity, trying repeatedly to explain about the accident, about saving the child, about his willingness to settle the bill, but the crowd grew more aggressive with each attempt. Maya stood by the door, pastries in hand, watching the scene unfold with growing distress. She knew Jake was telling the truth. She had witnessed the accident that likely cost him his wallet. He checked her watch again. 10:15 a.m. The library closed at 2 p.m., and she desperately needed those research hours for additional scholarship opportunities. But she also thought about the small emergency fund hidden in her shoe. Exactly enough money to cover Jake's meal, but also her bus fare for tomorrow's job interview across town. Without it, she would have to walk 6 hours round trip, potentially arriving too exhausted to make a good impression. As the crowd's hostility escalated, Maya made her choice. She walked to the counter and placed her carefully saved emergency money on the counter. "I'll pay for his meal," she said clearly. The room fell silent. Then came murmurs, shock, disapproval, and something uglier. Murphy looked at the money, then at Maya with barely concealed disdain. "You're making a mistake, girl. These people stick together. Bikers, troublemakers, birds of a feather." Maya's voice grew stronger as she spoke. 30 minutes ago, I watched this man risk his life to save a child in the street. I saw him roll under a truck to keep that boy safe. I saw him comfort Tommy when he was scared, treat him with kindness and gentleness. That's who he really is." The backlash was swift and ugly. "Figures the black girl would defend the criminal," someone sneered. "Both of you need to learn your place. Probably in it together." Murphy's face reddened. "We don't serve your kind here. Either kind. Both of you get out. You're banned permanently." Other customers applauded, emboldened by group support and mob mentality. Just then the door burst open. Tommy ran inside, still excited from his morning adventure, followed by his mother, Carol, a woman in her 30s with the same café au lait complexion as her son. "Grandpa Murphy," Tommy called out, running to the man behind the counter. "That's the man who saved me. He's a hero." The silence that followed was deafening. Carol confirmed her son's story, describing the accident in vivid detail. The crowd realized their collective mistake, but awkward shuffling and avoided eye contact replaced their earlier righteous anger. Murphy's face went pale as he realized he had just banned the man who saved his own grandson. But Maya and Jake had already left, walking away with their dignity intact, but their hearts heavy with the weight of human cruelty. Outside, Jake turned to Maya, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you. No one's ever done anything like that for me before. How can I repay you?" Maya shook her head, preparing to walk away. But Jake gently touched her arm. "Please, after what you just sacrificed for me, you deserve to know who you were defending." And so Jake told her about his son, how his marriage crumbled because his wife couldn't endure the dangerous reputation that came with the motorcycle club. He'd been working out of state for months, not on criminal business as people assumed, but organizing charity rides and fundraising events for children's hospitals and veterans groups. "I came back to town just to see my boy," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly. "I barely get to visit because of the custody arrangement. Everyone assumes the worst about me because of how I look, what I ride, the patches on my jacket. But you saw through all that. You saw who I really am." Maya listened, recognizing the striking parallels in their situations. Both judged unfairly, both fighting for family, both striving to overcome circumstances beyond their control. As she prepared to leave for the library, her college application packet slipped from her bag. Jake saw it, understanding immediately that her sacrifice had been even greater than he knew. She had given up not just money, but precious time she needed for her future. Maya Thompson, he read from the application, pre-law, civil rights. He looked up at her with new respect and a burgeoning sense of purpose. Maya walked toward the library, knowing she had lost valuable research time, but had gained something far more important: the profound knowledge that she had stood up for what was right. Behind her, Jake held her dropped application, a powerful plan taking shape in his mind. That evening, Jake sat alone in his modest hotel room, gazing out at the railroad tracks that bisected the town like a scar. Maya's application lay open on the small table beside him. Straight A's, an essay about aspiring to be a civil rights lawyer. Financial need meticulously documented, heartbreaking in its detail. He thought about his own son, about the unwavering courage Maya had displayed in the bakery, about second chances and the insidious ripple effects of prejudice. Then he opened his laptop and began making calls. What Maya and the townsfolk didn't know was that Jake Morrison wasn't just any biker. He was president of the Road Warriors, a motorcycle club that ran a legitimate charity foundation. His months away from his son hadn't been spent on criminal activities, but on fundraising and organizing charity rides that had amassed hundreds of thousands of dollars for various causes. Meanwhile, Maya returned home to find Grandma Rose savoring the lemon pastries on the front porch, her face brightened by the small luxury. "How was your trip downtown, baby?" Rose asked. Maya shared a carefully edited version of what had transpired: standing up for someone wrongly accused, the crowd's hostile reaction, how she had used her emergency money to help. She deliberately omitted missing her library time or tomorrow's transportation dilemma. Rose listened with a mixture of pride and worry. Though Maya didn't tell the full story, Rose sensed something significant had occurred. "When I was your age," Rose said softly, "I stood up to injustice more than once. Sometimes it cost me everything I had, but it was the only way to live with myself. You can't put a price on being able to look at yourself in the mirror." That night, alone in her small bedroom, Maya questioned her choices. She had never made it to the library for scholarship research. And now she had no money for bus fare to tomorrow's job interview at the cleaning company across town. The walk would consume 6 hours round trip, potentially leaving her too exhausted to make a good impression. Yet even as doubt crept in, she knew she couldn't have acted otherwise. The next morning at 5 a.m., Maya prepared for the arduous walk to her job interview. She dressed in her one good outfit, reviewed her prepared answers and tried to project confidence despite the setbacks. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavy with both possibility and fear in equal measure. At the same time, Jake rode through Maya's neighborhood, showing her application photo to neighbors and asking questions. Some were suspicious of the stranger on the motorcycle, but others were helpful. Finally, an elderly man gave him directions to Rose's house. Rose answered the knock at her door to find Jake standing on her porch, his motorcycle parked at the curb. Her initial fear, stranger, motorcycle, tattoos, quickly morphed into curiosity when he mentioned Maya's kindness. "My name is Jake Morrison. Yesterday your granddaughter showed more courage than most people show in a lifetime. She stood up for me when no one else would, and I need to thank her properly." Jake explained who he was, what Maya had done, and its profound meaning to him. Then he presented a scholarship check. Full tuition plus living expenses for 4 years from the Road Warriors Foundation's Courage in Action Scholarship, awarded to everyday heroes who champion others despite personal cost. Rose was overwhelmed, suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true, protective of Maya against potential scams. Jake patiently explained the foundation, showed documentation, and provided references she could call to verify everything. When Maya returned home at 2 p.m., exhausted from the 6-hour round trip but hopeful after a successful job interview, she found Jake and Rose talking on the porch. Her initial shock gave way to confusion as Rose explained the scholarship offer and how Jake had found them. Maya stared at the check at Jake at her grandmother's hopeful face. After a lifetime of closed doors, one was finally opening because she had chosen to stand up for someone else, because she had shown the courage to see past appearances to the truth underneath. "Why?" she whispered. Jake smiled. "Because yesterday you showed me what real courage looks like, and courage like that deserves to be rewarded." 4 years later, Maya Thompson strode across the stage in cap and gown, a Juris Doctor degree in hand. In the audience, Grandma Rose sat in a wheelchair, her condition stabilized by the proper medical care the scholarship had made possible. Beside her, Jake beamed with the pride of a surrogate father, his own son, now 12, finally understanding who his dad truly was. Maya's valedictory speech centered on justice, equality, and the courage to advocate for others. Without naming specifics, she referenced her experience in the bakery, how one moment of moral choice had shaped her entire career path. "Sometimes," she told the graduating class, "the most important test of our character comes not in a classroom, but in everyday moments when we must choose between what's easy and what's right." Returning to her hometown as a certified civil rights attorney, Maya found a community already beginning its transformation. The old neighborhood showed clear signs of improvement. New programs, better opportunities for kids like she used to be, and a growing understanding that prejudice harms everyone. Maya and Jake's paths had intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. His Road Warriors Foundation partnered with her new legal aid clinic, creating a unique model where bikers and lawyers worked in concert for community justice. Their unexpected Grace Community Center became a beacon of hope, offering everything from after-school programs to legal advice to scholarship opportunities. Even Murphy had undergone a transformation. The elderly baker, humbled by the realization of his grave mistake, became one of their most vocal supporters. His grandson Tommy, now 12, volunteered at the community center and frequently recounted the day the biker hero saved his life. The grand opening of the community center drew a diverse crowd. Leather-clad bikers stood alongside lawyers in suits, families from all backgrounds celebrating together. The building sat symbolically at the site of the old railroad crossing, and the foundation had funded a bridge that literally connected the two sides of town. Grandma Rose, though frail, cut the ribbon with shaking hands. She had lived to see her granddaughter not just succeed, but transform an entire community. Her sacrifice and Maya's courage had multiplied into something beautiful and lasting. As the celebration continued, a young girl approached Maya nervously. She was about 17, bright-eyed but burdened by the weight of poverty and limited options. A struggle Maya recognized instantly. "Miss Thompson," she began, "I heard about your scholarship program. I'm smart, but my family can't afford college and I don't know where to start." Maya looked into the girl's eyes and saw herself 4 years earlier. Scared, hopeful, desperate for someone to believe in her potential. She handed the girl a scholarship application and information about the foundation. "The most important thing to remember," Maya said gently, "is that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're afraid, even when it costs you something. That kind of courage changes everything." As the sun set over the community center, Maya and Jake stood together, watching the diverse groups of people. Children played, adults learned, volunteers from every walk of life worked side by side. The physical railroad tracks that once divided the town were now spanned by a bridge. But more importantly, the invisible barriers in people's minds were slowly crumbling. Jake's motorcycle club had become a force for positive change, challenging stereotypes wherever they went. Maya's legal clinic had won several important civil rights cases and helped dozens of families. Together, they had proven that the most unlikely partnerships could create the most powerful change. "You know," Jake said, watching a group of children play together regardless of color or background, "for years ago if someone had told me a 17-year-old girl would change my entire life by buying me a cup of coffee, I'd have laughed." Maya smiled, thinking of all the lives that had been touched by that single moment of courage in Murphy's bakery. Sometimes the smallest act of courage creates the biggest change. When you stand up for someone else, you're not just changing their day, you're changing their life, your life, and maybe even the world. In the growing twilight, the community center glowed with warm light and the sound of laughter. Inside, people who might never have spoken to each other were working together, learning from each other, building something beautiful together. All it had taken was one young woman's courage to see past appearances to the truth underneath. and one man's determination to ensure that courage was rewarded. From that single moment of grace had grown something unexpected and transformative, proof that in the most ordinary places, among the most unlikely people, extraordinary change was always possible. The cycle continued as Maya mentored the next generation, teaching them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else was more important than fear. And in a small town that had once been divided by railroad tracks and prejudice, bridges were being built every day, not just of wood and steel but of understanding, compassion, and hope. True courage means standing up for others despite personal cost. And such courage creates ripple effects that transform communities, proving that the most powerful change often comes from the most unexpected places. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.